In this aspect of our module, Schizoanalysis and the History of Desire, we focus more critically on the concept of schizoanalysis and its imbrications with capitalism. I might want to take a moment to say something about capitalism. There are many definitions of capitalism, each formidable in what it's trying to do. Not all are useful, but I find incredibly useful notions and descriptions of capitalism that remind us that it is a social material arrangement of bodies along neurotypical lines that tries to establish for itself a machine that instrumentalizes everything, including ecologies and human bodies, to create profit. So in that way, you could think about capitalism as a paradigm of thought, as a way of reproducing typical lines, as a way of understanding progress and time and temporality and well-being. Capitalism is not limited to what capitalists are doing. In that sense, I am not anti-capitalist. And this is not an anti-capitalist, pro-Marxist exploration. I don't think in those binaries, in those dichotomies. Instead, capitalism is here articulated as how we breathe, how we live, the things we take for granted, the ways we understand weather, the ways we understand simple gestures, love, time, the past, the future. At some level, you might even say that capitalism dances alongside white modernity in its extractivism, in its colonial reach. You might start to think about capitalism as a way that we are habituated to think about ourselves and the world. Hence my use of the term neurotypicality. The expectation that we move in the world in certain ways, and the expectation that certain forms of intelligences are accepted and others not quite so. So neurotypicality is how the world is arranged to make room for the proper subject. My son, who's autistic and has a different kind of intelligence, may not be accepted in molar, familiar, popular notions of education, because the way he arranges the world is different from the ways that consensus intelligence arranges the world. Neurotypicality is a form of capitalism, is a form of bodily arrangement in a hierarchy of power. And all of that is part of the analysis of schizoanalysis. Schizoanalysis is another way of saying what I say when I think about ab therapy. It's a way of noticing the history and tracing the history of desire as a world-shaping force. It's a way of talking to therapists and saying, maybe the reason why our modalities and approaches and medicines are getting less effective is because we're not paying attention to society and catalytic forces in society. It's also a way of turning to the Marxist, if you will, and saying maybe the reason why some transformational moment isn't happening for you is because you're not paying attention to the life of the mind. So schizoanalysis does this double critique of psychoanalysis, Freudian psychoanalysis, and its understandings of language and the self and typicality and what it means to be well. And it also turns its attention to anti-capitalist and Marxist forces. But what it wants to really do is to track desire, is to say that we are swimming in forces that are bigger than the individual. And until we can follow those skizzing lines, skizzing line, the crooked lines, the zigzagging formations through the world, the cracks, until we attend to them, we might find ourselves in very troubling convergences. Deleuze would speak of them as circles of convergence. We might find ourselves trapped in a death spiral. We might find ourselves in governance structures that use us and eat us, nourished by our protest and our outrage. And so in schizoanalysis, we examine the history of this philosophy. We trace its becoming, its development, and we trace especially its critical importance now in these moments. There's one more thing to say about schizoanalysis that feels pertinent here. And that is to connect it with my previous readings of how healing and justice and certain forces that look benevolent on the surface, you might even read as healing, how all of this is also an operation of death. I come from the global south, and in our world, we have been the recipients of benevolent gestures for long. We have thought of justice in terms of aid, foreign aid, and we have modified our environments to fit the expectations of the people who are our caretakers, philanthropic courses and activist platforms and organizations. So that, in a sense, we are looking more and more like the worlds we thought we were moving away from when our fathers and mothers enacted their independence movements. Some kind of neo-colonialism is at work in the ways we speak about ourselves and about our worlds. I call this tendency, and I've already spoken about this in another module, but we will be going deeper into it in the live session. I've called this iatrogenesis. Schizoanalysis is a naming of that tendency to offer rest to the traveler, only to hack the traveler in a violence of inclusivity. Schizoanalysis asks questions like, why do people keep on preferring and choosing their own shackles? Why do people seem to be invested in their own pain? Why can't they see the fascist overlord that everyone else can see? What is at work here when we choose, or when we say we choose? Schizoanalysis is a decentering of human rationality. It's a way of saying, no, we don't have it all together, and no, we're not quite good at framing our own emancipation. We will often shoot our own selves in the foot in the hope that we might arrive at a better tomorrow. It's also a way of noticing what Laurent Berlant called cruel optimism, when the very act or performance of hope only leaves us in places of despair. This work of tracing desire, as if we were part of something larger, as if our rationalities are not complete, but are fed by something else, as if the individual is not the magisterial decree that modernity thinks it is the work of schizoanalysis and ab therapy. And I think it's especially needed now as we think about politics in the world and the proliferation of new diagnostic criteria to understand how people are responding to these events at large. So that we're not just speaking about climate pathologies. We want to understand how climate is a form of desire and how we are moved and shaped in this atmosphere. Recently, some scientists noted that our brains probably start to shrink in times of global warming, so that climate is more than just an outside event. It is how our bodies are responding to worldly events. Tracing these worldly events, tracing our imbrications within coloniality, and longing for ruptures is the work of schizoanalysis. And we will explore more and all the competing philosophies and limitations of these philosophies as well in this section of Schizoanalysis and the History of Desire.